I'm 76 years old, and it took me 55 years to figure out something that you desperately need to hear now, not when you're my age. The cruel part? Nobody ever told me this. Not my parents, not my teachers, not my bosses, not even the people who loved me the most. They all repeated the same phrases, the same advice, the same lies, and I believed them. For decades. If you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, even 50s, this might be the most important thing you hear this year. Because what I'm about to tell you could save you decades of moving in the wrong direction and only realizing it when it's too late to turn back. My name is Robert. I'm 76. And for most of my life, I thought I was doing everything right. I did exactly what the world told me to do. I studied hard. I got decent grades. I chose a safe career. I worked long hours. I bought the house. I got married. We had kids. I contributed to my retirement account. I stressed about the future. I told myself, one day this will all pay off. One day it will all make sense. One day I'll finally feel like I arrived. That one day never came. Let me take you back to when I was 21. I had just graduated from college with a degree I didn't care about. Not because I was lazy, not because I was stupid, but because I chose it for one reason. Everyone told me it was practical. I remember sitting at a family dinner. My uncle asked, "So, what are you going to do now?" I said, "I'm not sure. I love writing. I love music. I'm thinking about maybe..." He cut me off and said, "You can do all that later. Get a real job first. Then when you retire, you'll have time for hobbies." That sentence stayed with me. Get a real job first. Then you'll have time for what you love later. So I did. I took the job at a mid-sized company in a gray building with gray walls and gray carpets. I wore the tie. I learned the phrases. I swallowed my questions. I became reliable. I was good at it. Too good. At 28, I got my first promotion. Everyone congratulated me. "You're on your way," they said. On my way to where, exactly? I didn't ask that question back then. I just smiled and worked harder. At 34, I bought a house I didn't need to impress people I barely knew. At 38, I bought a new car because everyone else in my neighborhood was upgrading theirs. At 41, I was successful on paper, and yet every morning felt like dragging a heavy body into a life that didn't quite fit. But I told myself the same thing everyone tells themselves. This is what being an adult is. This is normal. I'll enjoy life later. Here's what I didn't realize. Later is a fantasy you use to tolerate a present you're not willing to question. The turning point didn't come from some dramatic accident or near-death experience like you might expect. It started with something much smaller, much quieter. I was 55 years old. I was sitting in my car, alone, on a Sunday afternoon. No music, no podcast, just silence. My wife was visiting her sister. The kids were grown and living in other cities. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I had a day with no obligations, no plans, no one asking anything of me. You'd think that would feel like freedom. It felt like panic. I sat there and realized I had no idea what I actually wanted to do with a free day. Not what I should do, not what needed to be done, what I wanted. I couldn't answer. I knew how to be productive. I knew how to be responsible. I knew how to be useful. But I didn't know how to be myself. I remember gripping the steering wheel and thinking, how am I 55 years old and I don't know what I like? Not what I liked as a child, not what I dreamed about at 15. What do I like now? And in that parking lot, in that moment, a thought hit me so hard it took my breath away. I hadn't been living my life. I'd been living a template. Go to school, get a job, climb the ladder, buy things, delay joy. Hope it all makes sense at the end. It was like waking up and realizing you'd been following directions written for someone else. Don't get me wrong, I loved my wife. I loved my children. I'm grateful for them. But somewhere along the way, I disappeared. Not all at once, piece by piece, decision by decision. sacrifice by sacrifice. Every time I chose the safe option instead of the honest one. Every time I said yes when I meant no. Every time I said maybe later to something that lit me up inside. It took me 55 years to see the pattern. You don't lose yourself in one big moment. You lose yourself in 1,000 small, reasonable choices that slowly add up to a life you never chose. If you're feeling tired all the time, if your life looks good from the outside but feels empty on the inside, if you keep telling yourself, I should be grateful, but secretly feel like something is missing, listen carefully. Because what I'm about to say is the thing I wish someone had sat me down and told me when I was your age. The biggest mistake of my life was confusing approval with alignment. Let me explain. For 55 years, I measured my decisions by one question. Will this make people proud of me? Not out loud. I never admitted that to myself. But that was the metric. Will my parents approve? Will my boss be impressed? Will my friends respect me? Will society see me as responsible? And you know what? Most of the time, the answer was yes. Yes, they approved. Yes, they were proud. Yes, I was responsible. But there was a question I never asked. Does this actually line up with who I am and what I value? That's alignment. Approval is about how others feel about your life. Alignment is about how you feel living it. The truth is cruel. You can spend an entire lifetime chasing approval and never touch alignment once. At 55, I realized that almost every major decision I'd made was optimized for approval. My career? Chosen for respect and salary, not joy. My schedule? Filled to prove I was hardworking, not to honor my energy. My possessions? Bought to signal success, not because they added genuine meaning. Even my opinions? Smoothed over so I'd seem reasonable and likable. I had built a life that looked good on the outside and felt wrong on the inside. Here's what nobody told me. If you build your life on approval, you will always feel like you're living on someone else's terms, even when you technically have it all. Think about it. How many of your choices are really yours? The job you're in, did you pick it because it lights you up, or because it sounds good when you tell people what you do? The city you live in, did you choose it because it fits your soul, or because it fits expectations? The relationship you're in, are you there because it's true, or because it's what you're supposed to do next? I know these are uncomfortable questions. They should be. I avoided them for 55 years, but avoiding them doesn't save you from the consequences. It just delays them to a future you. And that future you might be sitting in a parked car at 55, realizing he doesn't know who he is without his responsibilities. You want to know what's terrifying? When the kids leave, the career slows down, the noise of your life fades, and you're left alone with yourself, and you realize you've never built a relationship with that person. You know what people around you need. You know what your boss wants. You know what your partner prefers. You know what your family expects. But you don't know what you deeply value. At 55, that realization nearly broke me. I started to look back over my life, over the decades, and ask, where did I betray myself? Not in dramatic ways, that's the tricky part, in small ways. At 23, when I didn't apply for something I wanted because I was afraid my family would judge it. At 29, when I accepted a promotion I didn't want because you don't turn down opportunities. At 36, when I stayed silent instead of saying, this isn't working for me. At 42, when I worked late again instead of going to my son's school event, telling myself, it's just this once, even though it never was just once. The pattern was always the same. Approve now, align later. But later never arrives on its own. If you don't consciously choose alignment, you drift into a life designed by your fears and other people's expectations. It took me 55 years to see that. And here's the part that hurts to admit, but you need to hear it. Nobody is coming to tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, You're allowed to live a life that actually fits you. You're allowed to choose differently. Everyone benefits from you following the script. Your boss, your company, even your family sometimes. You being predictable, helpful, and easy to understand makes their lives easier. It doesn't necessarily make your life truer. So no one will give you permission. You have to give it to yourself. At 55, sitting in that car, I realized, if I didn't change something, the rest of my life would be more of the same. More performing, more pretending, more quiet resentments, more waiting for that magical one day when it would all feel worth it. I knew, with this cold clarity, that if I continued on autopilot, I would wake up at 76 with the exact same emptiness, only with even less time to do anything about it. And that's where you are different from me. You have time I no longer have, but only if you use it. The first thing I did after that realization wasn't dramatic. I didn't quit my job overnight. I didn't sell everything and move to some distant place. That's what movies show you, but real life usually starts smaller. The first thing I did was this. I sat down with a blank piece of paper and wrote at the top, what do I actually want my remaining years to feel like? Not look like. Feel like. I stared at the question for a long time. And then, slowly, I wrote, I want to feel honest. I want to feel unhurried. I want to feel connected to the people I love. I want to feel like my days belong to me. I want to feel like I'm not pretending. For 55 years, I had been chasing what my life should look like. That was the wrong target. The right target was how my life felt when I was the one living it. That day, I realized the thing that took me more than half a century to understand. Your life is not a performance for others to applaud. It's an experience you are responsible for living. And if you don't consciously design that experience, the world will gladly assign you a role and congratulate you for playing it well, while you quietly fade away inside. At 76, looking back, the most painful question I ask myself is not, did I work hard enough? Or, did I achieve enough? It's this. How many years did I spend living a life that didn't feel like mine? Once you see that, you can't unsee it. After I wrote that list about how I wanted my remaining years to feel, I realized something else. Almost nothing in my current life supported those feelings. My schedule didn't feel honest. My days didn't feel unhurried. My relationships didn't feel deeply connected. My time didn't feel like it belonged to me. It was like realizing I'd been carefully building a house in the wrong direction. So I started making changes. Not dramatic ones at first. Just small rebellions against the life I'd built on approval. The first rebellion was saying no. For most of my life, I said yes to everything that sounded important. Extra projects, extra responsibilities, extra favors. I was proud of being the reliable one, the one who could be counted on. But reliability without boundaries isn't kindness. It's self-erasure. So the next time my boss asked if I could stay late just this week to finish a report, I took a breath and said, no, I can't. I have plans. He looked surprised. For 30 years, my default had been yes. He'd gotten used to it. The world gets used to your self-abandonment very quickly. Plans? He asked. Anything urgent? I thought about lying, saying it was a medical appointment or something serious. Instead, I told the truth. No, just plans for myself. He didn't know what to do with that. To be honest, neither did I. But I left on time anyway. I drove to a park I used to like when I was younger. I sat on a bench. I watched the light change. I did nothing productive. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt a little less like a stranger in my own life. That's what alignment feels like at the beginning. Unfamiliar. A little uncomfortable, but quietly right. The second rebellion was starting to tell the truth in my relationships. Not the brutal kind of truth people use as an excuse to be cruel. The gentle, honest kind that says, This is where I really am. This is what's really going on inside of me. One evening, I sat at the table with my wife. We'd been together for decades by then. We talked about groceries, bills, the weather, the usual. And I realized we hadn't had a real conversation, not about logistics, but about us, in months. So I said, "Can I tell you something I'm afraid to say?" She put her fork down. "What is it?" I took a breath and said, "I don't know who I am when I'm not working or solving problems. And I'm scared that I've wasted a lot of my life." Silence. I expected judgment. I expected her to say, "What are you talking about? You've done so much." That would have been kind, but it wouldn't have been what I needed. Instead, she looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "I've been feeling something similar. I've been afraid to say it too." In that moment, I realized something important. The people closest to you are often waiting for you to go first. They're waiting for you to break the illusion of everything's fine so they can finally tell the truth too. Approval keeps relationships shallow. Alignment makes them real. From there, I started asking different questions, not just to myself, but to the people around me. Instead of, "How was your day?" I started asking my wife, "What was one moment today that actually felt good to you?" Instead of, "How's work?" I started asking my grown kids, "Is the way you're spending your time right now how you want your life to feel?" Some of those conversations were awkward. Some were uncomfortable. But most of them were more alive than the safe, surface-level exchanges I'd been repeating for decades. You'll be surprised how many people are starving for someone to ask them real questions. The third rebellion was this. I stopped postponing the things that made me feel alive. For years, I had a list in my head of things I'd do when I retire, when things calm down, when we have more money, when the timing is right. Maybe you have a list like that too. Learn to play the piano. Travel to that country you've always dreamed about. Take a writing class. Start painting again. Spend more time in nature. Rebuild a broken relationship. Say the words you've never said. At 55, that list haunted me. It felt like a museum of abandoned selves. So I picked one. Just one. I'd always loved music. When I was a teenager, I used to stay up late with cheap headphones on, listening to the same albums over and over. I wanted to learn piano back then, but there wasn't time, and it wasn't practical. At 55, I walked into a small music school 5 minutes from my house. I asked if they had teachers who took older beginners. The receptionist smiled and said, "We love older beginners." That first lesson, my hand shook. Not because of the keys, but because of what it represented. Me choosing something purely because I wanted it, not because it fit my image. I was terrible at first, slow, clumsy, but something in me lit up. I started looking forward to that 1 hour a week more than almost anything else in my schedule. Here's what surprised me. Changing 1 hour changed the color of my entire week. When you give yourself even a small amount of true alignment, it starts to bleed into everything else. You start to question other parts of your life that don't fit. You start to feel less numb, less resigned. You start to remember that you are a person, not just a role. Over the next few years, the changes became bigger. I negotiated a different workload, fewer hours, less responsibility, less money too, but more life. I said no to promotions that would have taken more of my time and given me nothing my soul needed. People thought I was crazy. "You're so close to the top," they said. But here's what I'd finally understood. The top of a ladder leaning against the wrong wall is not a destination. It's a trap. I stopped chasing titles. I started chasing moments that felt true. I initiated hard conversations with my kids. I apologized for the times I'd chosen work over them. I didn't try to justify it. I didn't say, "I did my best." I said, "I made choices that hurt you. I wish I'd chosen differently. I'm trying to be different now." Sometimes they didn't know what to do with that at first, but slowly our relationships deepened. Not because I was suddenly a perfect father, but because I finally showed up as a real human being. Approval had made me distant. Alignment made me present. Now, I want to turn this toward you. If you keep living the way you're living right now, where does that road actually lead? Not the fantasy version, the real one. If you keep saying yes to everything except your own needs, if you keep choosing what looks good over what feels right, if you keep stuffing down the quiet voice that says, "This isn't it," where do you end up at 76? Because I can tell you where that road led me, to a life that looked respectable and felt half-lived. You don't have to burn your life down. You don't have to quit everything and disappear. That's another fantasy that keeps you stuck. The idea that the only way to change is through drama. The truth is less glamorous and more challenging. You change your life by consistently choosing alignment over approval, one decision at a time. Saying no when you've always said yes. Taking an hour a week for something that's only for you. Telling the truth in one conversation where you'd normally hide. Admitting, "I don't know who I am anymore," to someone you trust. Asking yourself every morning, what would make today feel a little more like my life? You might be thinking, but people will be disappointed. They'll be confused. They'll think I've changed. They're right. You will have changed, and that's okay. It took me 55 years to understand that it's better to be misunderstood while being yourself than to be praised for being someone you're not. The people who only love you when you are convenient, agreeable, self-erasing, they aren't actually loving you. They're loving the version of you that makes their life easier. The people who love you and are willing to go through the awkwardness of your growth, that's your real circle. At 76, my life is quieter than it used to be. I don't have the same status I once did. Fewer people know my name. My calendar isn't full. My phone doesn't ring as much. But when it does, it's usually someone I can be completely honest with. I play the piano badly but joyfully. I take walks without needing to check my email. I sit with my grandchildren and actually listen, instead of half listening while thinking about work. I wake up most mornings and think, this day feels like it belongs to me. I wish I had started this sooner. I would give a lot to have my 20s and 30s back with this clarity. To have raised my children with this much presence. To have shown my younger self that a life built on alignment can still be responsible, still be generous, still be good, just not at the cost of disappearing. You don't have to take 55 years to figure this out. You can start today. So here's what I want you to do after this video. Not tomorrow, not someday. Today. Take 10 minutes. Sit somewhere quiet. No phone, no noise, just you and a piece of paper. Right at the top. How do I actually want my life to feel in the next 5 years? Not what you want to own. Not what you want your title to be. Not what you want other people to say about you, how you want it to feel, and then answer honestly. Even if the answers scare you, even if they don't match the life you're currently living. That list is the beginning of alignment. Then pick one small action, just one, that moves you a tiny step toward that feeling. Guard it. Put it on your calendar like you would any other important commitment, because it is one. Your life is not a dress rehearsal. You don't get a second run where you finally do it your way. This is it. I'm 76. If I'm lucky, I have some years left. I'm grateful for them. I'm living them more honestly now than I did for decades. But you? You might have 40, 50, 60 years ahead of you. Don't spend them chasing approval and calling it being realistic. Don't wait until you're sitting in a parked car at 55, realizing you don't know who you are without your obligations. Don't let your life be something that happens to you while you're busy trying to look like you have it all together. You are allowed to choose alignment now. You are allowed to disappoint people in order not to abandon yourself. You are allowed to build a life that feels like yours, even if nobody fully understands it at first. If any part of this hits you in the chest, don't just nod and move on. Do something with it, even something small. Leave a comment and tell me one thing you're going to stop doing just for approval and one thing you're going to start doing for alignment. Subscribe if you want to hear more from someone who took far too long to learn this and doesn't want you to repeat the same mistake. Save yourself the decades I lost. The clock is ticking either way. The only question is, will you spend the time you have left performing or finally living?